And welcome back again. I know you're used to seeing us in the studios where we're in Lower Manhattan. We got the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse right behind us. That's the scene where Mr. Silver convicted this Monday, along with Dominic Carter. We're joined by Colby Hamilton, Politico New York, contributing reporter there. And like the rest of us, before we go into the next steps and where this goes, were you surprised by Monday? And do you think the establishment in Albany saw this coming, or they said could be another acquittal here?
Well, I was talking to somebody the day afterwards, and they said that a lot of people up in Albany were praying for Shelon Silver, because I think to Dominic's point, this was in some ways Albany on trial, right? So, but for, the grace of God, there go I in a sort of situation, because who hasn't had a situation where they've been doing something political and they don't know what they're,
But in a perverse way, Colby, wouldn't it have been worse or a bigger indictment on the status quo if he was acquitted? And basically what he did would have been perfectly fine and business as usual as Albany. In a perverse way, I think there was a sigh of relief from the governor. We saw it from his statement the very next day when it came out. I thought the worst thing that could have happened to Albany is if Shelon Silver just made his way back up 87 and went back to work.
Well, that was the argument, right? If there was an acquittal, then you'd basically be, it would be worse to be saying that this is how politics gets done, and that's just we're going to have to just accept it. I do think that, at least among my colleagues that were in there, we were surprised on all 7 counts. That was surprising.
Yep.
But I think a jury like this is going to, even Judge Capronis said it, what's your common sense? What do you feel is going on here? And when you give an instruction like that, it's hard, given the state of how people view Albany, how they view politics, not to get an indictment, rather a guilty on something in there. But all 7 was surprising with all 7.
Now, Dominic, I said at the top, as Andrew set up, this has been a seismic year for Albany. I don't care how jaded you are. Yeah. The 2 of the 3 men of the room were indicted, one already convicted, the other one most people would assume will be as well at the end, only leaving the governor standing. Nonetheless, even a cynic that I am, the statement the governor put out here saying now it's time for real reform in Albany, now it's time for transparency, everything else, it told me at least 2 things. One is, he wasn't worried about recriminations that there was anything either of these 2 guys have on him. And then B, moreover, I got to get some hip waders here because he's the same guy who shut down Moreland.
It's very interesting as when you look back at the history of shutting down Moreland, stuff that you've been talking about night after night, and how this actually went from Moreland, Cuomo shutting it down, to these 2 courthouses. And what's ironic, Richard, the U.S. Attorney, Mr. Bharara himself, his office literally is just right around the corner here, and he would come, as you can vouch, just about every day inside this courtroom. It's going to be interesting to see what happens now going forward. You were talking about Judge Capronis. It's interesting to watch her in action. She ran a pretty tight ship inside that courtroom. And so what's going to be interesting now, the Silver story is, what day is he sentenced? What is his sentence? Is he going to stay out of jail on appeal?
While the court stuff will play out, for me what was interesting was Cuomo's 2 statements. One saying it'll be a new day in Albany. Obviously, it's always a new day. But also, he won't be pushing for what seems to be, at least politically, maybe not politically, but publicly popular, which is, let's make these guys full-time already. If you're going to have an assemblyman or a state senator working 3-4 days a week now, and they're an attorney, who in their right mind is going to retain them as counsel unless it's for access and influence? So to that end, the governor says, yeah, not so much. We're going to focus on transparency. I just think if there was ever a window for him to drive a truck through it, what lawmaker in their right mind would oppose him for if he wanted to do this? Were you surprised he already shut the door on it?
I don't know if it's the cynic in me. I don't want to be cynical, but I wasn't surprised. You noticed in his first release, he didn't mention the words guilty, and he didn't mention Shelon Silver by name. So it was almost as if this thing had happened, and he wanted to let's just pull the curtain shut and get back on with our lives. As my colleague Jimmy Vielkind wrote for Politico New York, this is the opportunity. Now is the time. But you don't see anyone in Albany picking up the banner, challenging the governor, saying now's the time. And in a certain sense, why would they? They would be having to regulate themselves and show me legislation.
Wouldn't it be in his self-interest? Remember, maybe people don't go back that far, but 5 years ago, with Boss Tweed in the background, that was his big thing. He's going to dredge the swamp. Remember all that? This is his chance, for whatever reason. If he wanted to, he could get it done now. He's choosing not to.
Well, I mean, you could argue he could have got it done when the indictments came down. He could have got it done in any of the other times when anybody else had gotten in trouble, and he's chosen not to. I don't know if it's just that there's not a political will with him. I don't know if he's talking to legislators and he understands that there's going to be resistance if somebody wants something, or if the new rules could potentially harm him. And I mean, Andrew Cuomo will always be concerned with Andrew Cuomo, no matter what. Which, you know, it's his own self-interest as well, okay. So I understand.
Well, let's stay with Andrew Cuomo. We all remember the stay tuned comment from Mr. Bharara. Mm-hmm. Well, 2 of the 3 men in the room are having their day or have had their day in court here. I read into it, you don't put that statement out unless you feel pretty much this thing's past you. Do you both feel there may be more horizontal investigations of other lawmakers, but it's not going up to the executive office? Do you think the governor's clear at this point?
I don't know, Richard. If there was ever a prosecutor that would take on a sitting governor, it is this prosecutor right here. This guy, major victory for him in terms of Shelon Silver, not looking good for Skelos. Your term, the 3 men in the room, well, it appears that Mr. Bharara has taken out 2 out of the 3. So I don't know, but I wouldn't really sleep on this guy. He's got a promising future either in politics or as possibly in a Democratic administration, U.S. Attorney General.
Both the guys forecast their political futures. Nobody's going to tell me that Mr. Bharara does not have ambitions beyond the U.S. Attorney's office. So both the governor, you could argue, has more power than before these investigations even began, albeit is he tarred by the scandals that have hit? Depends on who you talk to. And secondly, Bharara, where he goes from here. Where do you see the second term or the balance of it for the governor, and where do you see Bharara's next play?
Well, I mean, for the governor, obviously he has more leverage than he did before. He has new guys in there that are going to come at this at a disadvantage for him. It's tough because when you look at a third term, you got to remember his dad's third term and how that really sunk his ambitions for president. You have to believe that if Andrew Cuomo is anything, he's a student of politics and knows how hard a third term can be. So I would not put it past him trying to figure out some way to turn all of what he's done as governor into something else. Obviously, his presidential ambitions, at least for now, are put on hold. But this puts him in a position, I think, where he's looking over his shoulder the whole time, because as you pointed out, if there's anybody that's going to go after him, it's going to be this U.S. attorney. And the whole culture in Albany, while it may not be on the books that things have changed, you've got to feel that everyone up there is watching their back and second-guessing and re-going over in their minds everything that they've done to consider what's going on. So I think you're going to see a subdued Albany. You're going to see people sort of just towing the line and figuring out a way to keep from getting in trouble, at least in their own minds.
I have heard that before, Dominic, and yet we've been with these courthouses in the backdrop too many other times. Do you believe, and you're even more cynical than me, but do you believe the message finally got through because there is more transparency in terms of outside income? That part, as much as we want to make fun of it, it is true. And how many members of the Assembly and Senate have come on our set and told us, I'm telling you, the new wave is different than the old guard?
Yes, Richard.
Is it better?
I think, okay, let's look at the juror's words. Juror number 6. She said she was the holdout in Silver's favor. And she said, when she spoke to us and others, what turned her around was she didn't see the income on his disclosure form. So I think it is a new day. I think that officials are going to be very careful as it relates to outside income. I think they realize that federal prosecutors are not playing anymore.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys both here. As I said to Jimmy as well, braving the elements. We're going to throw it back now to the studio where Andrew's in the climate-controlled studio. Andrew, back to you.
All right, Rich, thank you very much. And we want to get you at home involved in this conversation. Head over to Twitter or Facebook and sound off on our question tonight. Will Shelon Silver's conviction lead to ethics reform in Albany? Up next, the guy who literally wrote the book about Andrew Cuomo, his feuds, his ambitions, his history. The author who pulled back the curtain on the governor joins us next.